I'm Cassandra Watts. I'm 31 years old. I carry a deep scar just below my collarbone from shrapnel and a damaged knee from multiple combat deployments in Syria. But neither of those injuries compare to the crushing weight of standing inside a luxury hotel ballroom in Mayfair on what was supposed to be my brother's perfect day. I had just arrived from deployment, wearing my dress uniform to celebrate. The first voice I heard was my future sister-in-law, Arabella, standing at the center of an admiring circle, deliberately raising her volume so I could hear every word. "Women like her never build anything real," she sneered. "She's probably just hiding behind a uniform to avoid facing actual life." The crowd laughed. My own brother Julian stood directly beside her. He looked away. "Before I go any further, real quick, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it there? Take a second and drop it in the comments." All right, let's get into this. The laughter hit like shrapnel. The ballroom air was thick and suffocating. Crystal chandeliers cast cruel, unforgiving light across polished marble floors. Arabella stood center stage in her cream silk dress, champagne flute dangling from perfectly manicured fingers, surrounded by her echo chamber of bridesmaids and cousins. I said nothing. My hands gripped a glass of water. These palms were mapped with calluses from fast roping out of helicopters and holding service rifles. The condensation on the glass chilled my skin as a dull, grinding ache radiated from my left knee, a permanent souvenir from an IED blast during operations near Aleppo. My eyes tracked straight to Julian, the groom. He stood fully within earshot. He saw my face. He heard every word. His reaction was to raise his craft IPA, stare intensely at the string lights overhead, and pretend the world around him did not exist. Coward, I scanned the tent. Silk table runners, silver trays of canapes. None of these people spraying themselves with French perfume and giggling at my expense had any idea what this cost me. I had missed 8 straight family Christmases. I had spent holidays eating dry rations in concrete bunkers across the Middle East. Every penny of my hazard pay had been carefully hoarded. That money was not just income. It was survival, wrapped in the smell of cordite and paranoia. When I found the seating chart, my stomach twisted. Every name on the front bore a title in bold gold lettering: Dr. Arthur Sterling, Colonel James Pemberton. My card sat deliberately hidden behind an oversized floral centerpiece. Just 2 words printed on cheap stock: Cassandra Watts, no rank, no commander, no recognition of who I was. An active duty intelligence officer, erased from the paper entirely. Sharp pain exploded across my forearm. Arabella's elbow had jammed directly into my arm. She brushed past me, her voice dropping into a venomous hiss meant only for my ears. "Move out of the way. Family is trying to work here." Ice water splashed down the back of my hand. I did not give them the reaction they wanted. I pulled a white napkin. I wiped every drop, methodically and slowly. Then I folded the place card and shoved it deep into my pocket. My lips curled into a cold, dead smile. I did not light this fire, but I absolutely intended to burn this entire structure to the ground. The weight of that card in my pocket dragged me backward through time. 12 years ago. My mother's kitchen, linoleum cracked beneath my hands. I was scrubbing muddy footprints off the floor because Julian had backed my father's car into a concrete pole showing off for his friends. Instead of discipline, instead of consequences, he received a backyard barbecue. The neighborhood gathered. The grill was stacked high with meat. Everyone cheered for the boy who destroyed things. 2 years later, I placed my university acceptance letter on that same kitchen counter. Full scholarship. My mother did not even open the envelope. She simply slid it back toward me. "The savings go to Julian's company," she said flatly. "You're on your own." It was not a mistake. It was systematic. A perfectly engineered machine designed to keep Julian centered, no matter how many times he failed. When his roofing business bled money from day one, my parents did not tell him to find real work. They took out a second mortgage on their house to cover his debts. I watched them pull him into their arms. I watched them wipe his tears. In their eyes, a son failing was just a victim of circumstance. A daughter succeeding was just unnatural ambition. They did not beat me. They did something far worse. They looked right through me with cold indifference that slowly stripped away everything I was. They planted a seed behind my ribs, the belief that I would never be good enough to earn unconditional love. The fork against Crystal yanked me back to the present. I was sitting at a round table, the white linen blinding under chandelier light. Across from me sat Colonel Edward Harrington, an old grizzled veteran with a thick white mustache and a chest full of invisible ghosts. He let out a loud, raspy laugh, his scarred hand slamming the table. "So," he boomed, looking directly at me, "is it true the commander spends her days commanding a bunch of meathead Marines?" I took a slow sip of water, keeping my voice low and steady. "Only when they need adult supervision, Colonel." Genuine laughter rippled across our end of the table. At the head table, the noise died. Julian stopped chewing, his jaw locked, his grip on his knife tightened until his knuckles turned bone white. "Come on now," Julian sneered, stabbing his fork violently into a piece of steak. "I thought most of your work was at a desk. No bombs or bullets, just paperwork." The tent went silent. With 3 sentences, he had weaponized our mother's exact tone. He took my combat medals, the shrapnel buried in my knee, the blood I scrubbed off my boots, and threw it all into garbage. I stared directly into his eyes. I did not raise my voice. "You have no idea what kind of monster you just woke up." The memory of real blood and real sacrifice surged through my veins like freezing water. My thumb traced the thick, jagged scar tissue snaking up my left wrist. At 22, I had signed a piece of paper to escape my parents' house. Julian called me a coward. He had absolutely no idea what my desk actually looked like. My desk was hard-packed dirt under Syrian sun. It was the deafening crack of an IED, detonating directly under our Humvee's right tires. I remember the stomach-dropping sensation of a 7-ton armored truck lifting completely off the ground. The violent impact when it slammed back into the crater, the blinding cloud of pulverized concrete and dust, the heavy, metallic taste of my own blood. While Julian complained about heat on residential roofs, I was kneeling in dirt, my hands slick with arterial spray, jamming combat gauze into a young Marine's torn neck while rounds chewed up the brick wall 3 feet above my head. 5 years ago, at 3:51 a.m., my phone vibrated in a transient barracks. It was Julian. When I answered, there was no arrogance, just the pathetic sound of a grown man sobbing. The bank had frozen his commercial lines of credit. 2 supply checks had bounced. His crew was threatening to walk if they did not get paid by Friday. My parents had already drained their house equity, trying to float his failures. He begged me for £32,000. He swore he would pay me back the second the business turned a profit. I sat in the pitch-black room, staring at my banking app. £32,000. That was hazard pay. Combat deployments, months of sleeping with my boots on. That money was supposed to be my escape hatch. A down payment on a small house, where nobody could ever make me feel small again. I wired the entire amount before sunrise. Back in the ballroom, Julian had just finished cutting another piece of steak. He chewed aggressively, washing it down with another massive swallow of beer. He did not glance in my direction. The man who had wept on the phone begging me to save him from bankruptcy was now sitting 3 feet away, using that same mouth to humiliate me in front of his new wife's friends. He took my £32,000 to survive. Now he was taking my dignity to impress Arabella. The exhaustion I had carried for 12 years froze solid. It transformed into a heavy block of cold steel right behind my ribs. The kind of absolute clarity that only comes right before you pull a trigger. I set my fork down. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood up. My spine was perfectly straight. My shoulders were squared. I was not running. I was simply leaving the kill zone. Outside on the patio, I leaned against the damp railing. The London night air carried the smell of the river and spilled beer from the outdoor bar. My phone lit up. A text from James, my old unit medic. "Remember who you are, Cassandra." I locked the screen. I needed that. Heavy footsteps approached. High heels clicking hard and fast. Vanessa's voice carried across the patio. "She is harmless. Women like her never actually build anything. They just take orders. It is sad." I did not move. I simply watched her. Then the air shifted. Heavy, measured footsteps. Leather, heel-striking boards with absolute calibrated purpose. A massive figure parted the small crowd. Close-cropped silver-white hair. Shoulders as wide as a doorframe. General Marcus Blackwood, 4-star Marine Corps commander. His eyes were scanning the porch. Target locked, he stopped 3 feet away from me. His relaxed father of the bride exterior vanished instantly. His posture snapped rigid. Arabella panicked. She stepped directly into his path, flashing a blinding smile. "Oh, General Blackwood, do you two know each other?" He did not look at her. He did not acknowledge her voice. He simply stepped around her like she was misplaced furniture. Arabella's hand hovered in empty air. The general stopped directly in front of me. His eyes carved right through the cheap drama of this wedding. His voice was low, thick with gravel. "Commander Watts." Every conversation on the porch died. I straightened my spine. I brought my heels together. General Blackwood reached out. His massive scarred hand engulfed mine. The grip was tight, rough with old calluses. 2 soldiers, an anchor in a sea of nonsense. "I cannot believe it," he muttered, his voice actually cracking. "Nobody told me." The sliding glass door rattled open. Julian stumbled out onto the patio, his tie loosened, a fresh IPA in his hand. He saw the general gripping my hand. Confusion washed over his flushed face. He jogged over, trying to play the big welcoming host. "Hey, Marcus, everything good out here?" General Blackwood slowly turned his head. He looked at Julian the way a sniper looks at a target right before pulling the trigger. Cold, clinical, disgusted. "Trouble," the general repeated. "Son, your sister pulled my boy out of the fire. 2 years ago, outside our position near Raqqa, my son's unit was pinned down. Commander Watts authorized danger close artillery. She directed the medevac while taking heavy sustained fire. She brought my son back to me." Emily had stepped out onto the porch just in time to hear it. She covered her mouth, her eyes wide. The blood drained completely out of Julian's face. General Blackwood's voice rose. "Why is her rank not on her table card? You do not even know who your own sister is." Julian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The general set his glass down on the railing with a sharp, violent clack. He looked back at me, his expression softening just slightly, returning to absolute military respect. He gave me a single firm nod. "Outstanding service, Commander." He turned and walked back inside. The sliding door clicked shut. The silence on the porch was deafening. The hierarchy had just been violently reset. The outside world had walked in and handed me the ultimate validation. Exposing my own blood family as ignorant frauds, Julian stood there completely neutered in front of his new wife's friends. He stared at his shoes, entirely stripped of his false pride. I did not gloat. I picked up my water glass and took a slow drink. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw Arabella retreat to the far edge of the patio, half hidden behind a large potted plant. Her face was dark, twisted with pure humiliation. She was glaring directly at me. Narcissists do not surrender when they bleed. They look for a knife. The ambush was coming. The family brunch was the next morning. The London sky was a flat, bruised grey. Cold, steady drizzle hit the hotel window, smearing the glass. My military clock woke me before the alarm. I pulled on a heavy black turtleneck, dark jeans. I ran my hands down the fabric, smoothing invisible creases. "I needed the armor today." Another text from James. "They judge you before you even open your mouth. It means they are terrified of you." A public dressing down by a 4-star general does not magically fix a toxic family. It just makes them regroup. They were not going to apologize. They were going to double down. The hotel dining room was thick with suffocating tension. The second I pushed the glass doors open, the low chatter died off. Arabella was holding court at the center, flanked by her hungover bridesmaids. Julian sat slouched next to her, dark sunken bags under his eyes like bruises. Even from 15 feet away, I could smell the sour reek of cheap beer sweating out of his pores. But Arabella was wide awake, practically vibrating with hateful energy. She needed to reclaim the territory she lost on the patio. I walked toward the buffet. I did not look at them. I just kept my face blank and my posture straight. Arabella stirred her tea, the metal spoon clinking aggressively against the ceramic cup. She pitched her voice perfectly, loud enough for her bridesmaids, loud enough for the tables nearby, and exactly loud enough for me to hear every word. "I just think it is sad. Some people make their rank their entire personality. A wedding is supposed to be about family and love, not about showing off your resume." 2 of the older relatives at the adjacent table gave slow, knowing nods. I did not break my stride. I picked up a small white plate, reached for a single warm biscuit. I walked directly to the empty chair across from Julian and Arabella. I pulled it out. The wooden legs scraped loudly against the tile floor. I sat down perfectly straight, shoulders squared. I did not say a word. I picked up a butter knife. I slowly, methodically dragged the blade across the biscuit. Scrape. Then again. Smooth even, deliberate. The sheer silence radiating from my side of the table hit them like a physical weight. Arabella's smirk melted away. The bridesmaids shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Suddenly fascinated by the bottom of their coffee cups, silence is a weapon. When you do not react, when you refuse to give a narcissist the screaming match they are begging for, they start to suffocate on their own poison. Arabella's eyes darted nervously. She opened her mouth to fill the dead air with another veiled insult. I set the butter knife down with a sharp, clean clink. I looked up. I locked onto Julian's hollow, bloodshot eyes. He tried to look away, but I pinned him down with an unblinking stare. Then I slowly shifted my gaze to Arabella. I took a bite of the biscuit. I chewed it slowly, swallowed. "It is funny," I said, my voice cutting through the stale air like a blade. "I always thought that if you were actually family with someone, you would at least know what they did for a living." Arabella's spoon stopped moving. Her mouth fell open. The fake smile completely shattered. Julian lowered his head closer to his plate. He did not say a word to defend his wife. He did not say a word to defend himself. I did not need to raise my voice. I took the blade she tried to stab me with and drove it straight into the rotting core of the Watts family dynamic. Their profound, willful ignorance was out on the table for everyone to look at. I picked up my coffee cup. I kept my eyes locked on Arabella. She abruptly pushed her chair back, the legs screeching against the floor, and stormed out without looking back. The evening reception was drowning in warm yellow ambient light. The air smelled like roasted prime rib, expensive bourbon, and melting candle wax. I walked past the open bar and poured myself a cup of black unsweetened coffee. Through the dense crowd, I spotted Arabella holding a large glass of red wine, holding court with out-of-town relatives near the back of the room. I walked up quietly, standing just outside her peripheral vision. "Molly is always at work," Arabella sighed, swirling her dark wine. "Her entire life is just barking orders and following protocols. It is a lonely way to live. She is just so emotionally starved." The relatives murmured in sympathetic agreement. It was the ultimate pathetic weapon insecure women used against independent ones. If you do not need their validation, you must be broken inside. I stepped directly into the light. I set my coffee cup down on the high-top table next to her. The ceramic base hit the wood with a dull, heavy thud. The relatives froze mid-sip. "It is funny," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the upbeat jazz music. "For decades, people have used those exact same words to describe men who dedicated their lives to their service. But they never called it emotionally starved. They called it leadership." I tilted my head, keeping my eyes locked dead on hers. The color drained out of Arabella's face, only to be instantly replaced by a hot, ugly red flush. Her primary weapon had been snapped in half in front of an audience. She scrambled to save face, her voice pitching up nervously as she gripped her wine glass. "Well, I just mean there is more to life than rank and files," she stammered. I picked up my coffee cup. I took a slow, deliberate sip of the bitter black liquid. "There should be," I replied. My absolute calm suffocated her argument. She turned on her heel and pushed her way into the crowd. From the far side of the ballroom, a sharp metallic sound cut through the noise. Clink, clink, clink. Colonel Harrington was standing at the main head table. He held a silver fork, tapping it steadily against the side of a crystal champagne flute. The room began to quiet down. The old veteran's eyes locked onto me. He raised his hand, gesturing toward the stage. "Commander Watts, would you care to come up here and make a toast to the new family?" I lowered my coffee cup. My eyes swept directly toward the center of the head table. Julian was sitting there, his face suddenly pale, completely unaware that the ground beneath his feet was entirely rigged with explosives. It was time to fire the heavy artillery. I walked past the rows of white linen tables, my eyes fixed straight ahead. The harsh, brilliant glare of the spotlight hit my face as I approached the podium. My pulse accelerated. It was the familiar adrenaline dump that happens the second before you step out from behind cover. I wrapped my hand around the metal shaft of the microphone. My palms were slick with cold sweat. I pulled it off the stand. A high-pitched screech of audio feedback blasted through the overhead speakers. A warning shot. I let the silence stretch out for 3 agonizing seconds. "Thank you, Colonel," I said. My voice echoed off the high ceiling. It was completely steady, stripped of any fake warmth. People usually think that strength has to be loud. They think it looks like yelling or throwing your weight around. But the truth is, some of the absolute toughest people I have ever served with have been scared out of their minds at one point or another. I swept my eyes across the crowd. I locked them directly onto Julian, sitting hunched next to his arrogant new wife. I tightened my grip on the microphone. I slowed my cadence down. Every word was a calculated strike. "Years ago," I continued, "someone I cared about very much called me at 3:51 in the morning. He was in an absolute blind panic. His business was completely nosediving. The bank had locked him out. He was out of options. A low wave of murmurs rippled through the tables. Aunts and uncles whispering behind their hands. Julian's throat went bone dry. He swallowed hard. He set his fork down and gripped the thick edge of the banquet table with both hands. His knuckles were white. "I helped," I said, my voice echoing like a judge reading a sentence in an empty courtroom. "Because that is what you are supposed to do when you see your own blood drowning in the water. You throw them a line. You do not just turn your back and let them sink to save yourself." The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. It was a suffocating, crushing weight pressing down on the head table. A blade pressed right against his throat. Just as the silence reached its breaking point, movement caught the corner of my eye. Down in the front row, General Blackwood stood up. He did not rush. He did not say a word. The old Marine simply pushed his chair back and took one single deliberate step forward into the edge of the spotlight. He looked at me. Then he turned his massive head and locked his eyes on Julian. General Blackwood did not need a microphone. His voice rolled through the reception hall like a shockwave. "Son, did your sister help save your company or not?" Julian physically shrank. The false swagger, the arrogant smirks, the loud laughter, it all evaporated. He dropped his head, unable to look the general in the eye. Hundreds of eyes were drilling into him from every corner of the room. He was pinned. "Yes," Julian whispered. Arabella's head snapped toward her new husband. "What?" she shrieked, completely forgetting her polished routine. "Helped with what?" Julian's hands slid off the edge of the table. They hung uselessly at his sides. Things were bad. The bank was calling in the loans. I was going under. I called Cassandra. She wired me £32,000. The collective gasp from the crowd sucked the air right out of the room. The illusion was dead. The heavy, suffocating curtain of lies was ripped completely off the track. The hazard pay I had earned, the money I had saved to buy my own freedom, had been buried under this ridiculous spectacle. And the man who took it had sat back and let his new wife treat me like garbage. Arabella fractured. The realization hit her that she had married a man drowning in debt. A man who survived solely on the charity of the sister she had spent the last 24 hours publicly humiliating. She panicked. She desperately clawed for the one tactic that always worked for her. Play the victim. "Oh, I see," Arabella spat, her voice shrill and trembling. Her face flushed a dark, angry red. She glared at me, her hands shaking as she grabbed the edge of the table. "So now I am the villain. Is that it? You just wanted to humiliate us on our wedding day, to make yourself look like a hero." I did not step back. I did not raise my voice to match her hysterical pitch. I tightened my grip on the microphone. I looked directly into the eyes of the woman who had laughed at me from her blind spot just hours ago. "You treat people you think are beneath you like dirt before you even take 5 seconds to figure out who they actually are," I said. My voice cold and flat. I paused. I let the silence hang for a beat. "Take a look around, Arabella. Is anyone standing up to defend you right now?" Dead silence. Arabella whipped her head around. She looked at the bridesmaids sitting right next to her. The girls she had been gossiping with all morning. They averted their eyes. One of them actually shifted her chair away. Arabella looked out at the tables of aunts and cousins. The same people who had chuckled at her cruel jokes earlier were now staring at her with blatant disgust. When the truth drops, parasites abandon the sinking ship. There was no lifeline left. No one was going to save her. The absolute crushing weight of public rejection broke her. Arabella let out a sharp, ugly sob. She grabbed her expensive clutch purse off the table. She shoved her chair backwards so hard it tipped over. The heavy wooden chair hit the carpet with a loud, violent thud. She turned and ran. She practically sprinted down the center aisle of the ballroom, pushing past a waiter carrying a tray of empty glasses. Her sharp stiletto heels hammered against the floorboards as she fled the room. Julian jerked upward, his hands gripping the table. "Arabella, wait!" he croaked. He took half a step out from behind the table. Then he froze. His shoes felt like lead. He stood there completely exposed in the middle of the head table, looking out at the sea of faces. Not a single person was looking at him with pity. They looked at him like he was a thief. He slowly sank back down into his chair, burying his face in his hands. I did not smile. I did not feel the urge to cheer or pump my fist. The job was done. I set the microphone down on the wooden podium. The dull clack signaled the end of the operation. I turned to my right. General Blackwood was standing right there. He did not say a word. He reached out and clapped a heavy calloused hand onto my shoulder. One firm squeeze. Complete respect. I gave him a single nod. I turned my back on the head table. I kept my posture straight, my chin level. I walked down the steps of the podium and headed straight for the exit. The crowd parted. Aunts, uncles, and cousins stepped backward, clearing a wide path for me. At 5:30 a.m., the military discipline that had kept me alive for 10 years booted up. No hesitation, no lingering in wreckage. I zipped my duffel bag shut. I pulled on dark jeans and a heavy black sweater. At 6:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Can we talk before you leave? Cassandra?" I took the elevator down. The hotel lobby was completely dead. Flat grey pre-dawn light filtered through the large windows, stripping all colour out of the room. Julian was slumped deep into a leather armchair, looking like a deserter who had just surrendered his rifle. He wore the same clothes from the reception. The tie was gone. The collar was unbuttoned. I walked over. On the low glass table in front of him sat a black cardboard cup of coffee. No sugar, no cream. It was the only detail about me he had managed to remember correctly in 4 years. Right next to the coffee was a thick brown envelope. I sat down in the chair across from him. I kept my back straight against the upholstery. Julian pushed the envelope slowly across the glass. The rough paper made a dry scratching sound. He ran his hands over his face. When he looked at me, his eyes were bloodshot and rimmed with red. He looked completely broken. "I am so ashamed," he rasped, using a childhood nickname I had not heard in a decade. His voice cracked. "It was not that I forgot what you did for me. I just felt like a massive failure every time I looked at you. So I let Arabella say those things. I let her talk down to you because it made me feel bigger. It soothed my ego." There it was. The absolute ugly truth lying naked on the glass table. He was not stupid. He was just a coward. He hated me not because I did anything wrong, but because my simple existence exposed exactly how weak he really was. I looked down at the envelope. £32,000. I reached out and pulled it toward me. The rough paper scraped against my calloused fingertips. My expression did not change. I did not feel a sudden rush of forgiveness. I felt absolutely nothing but the freezing cold clarity of someone drawing a permanent line in the sand. "This does not fix it, Julian," I said. My voice was steady. It hit the air like a hammer striking an anvil. "I am not going back to being the punching bag this family uses to feel better about themselves. And I am never going to sit quietly and let someone talk down to me just because the truth makes them uncomfortable." He slowly nodded his head. An unconditional surrender. He knew the bridge was not just burned. It was completely vaporized. He had bought back his debt, but he had permanently lost his sister. I stood up. I grabbed the coffee cup and the envelope in one hand, my duffel bag in the other. We walked out through the sliding glass doors into the pre-dawn air. A thick, wet morning fog rolled off the Thames, clinging to the asphalt. My rental car was parked 3 spots away. Julian stopped near the bumper. He shoved his hands deep into his pockets. His eyes were wet. "I am going to miss you," he said, his voice thick. "Call me before the next crisis, not just when you need something." I stopped. I looked at the man I had practically raised, the man I had bled for. I stepped forward and wrapped my free arm around his shoulders. It was a brief, stiff embrace. Polite. Mechanical. There was absolutely no warmth left in it. It was not a hug to welcome him back. It was the physical closing of a door. I pulled away. I did not say goodbye. I turned my back to him, opened the door of the rental car, and threw my duffel bag onto the passenger seat. The heavy metal door slammed shut. I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I put it in drive and hit the gas. I did not look in the rearview mirror. The commercial jet engine spooled up with a deafening mechanical roar. I leaned my head back against the stiff fabric of the window seat and watched London fall away beneath us. The sprawling waterfront, the historic architecture, everything shrank down into meaningless little dots before being completely swallowed by grey morning clouds. I turned away from the cold glass. The man sitting next to me in the aisle seat was asleep. He was older, maybe late 60s. His face was weathered, lined with deep creases like dried leather. Above his left breast pocket was a frayed, faded patch. Vietnam veteran. His large scarred hands rested quietly on his lap. A strange, silent sense of connection settled into my chest. I did not need to wake him. I did not need to ask him about his deployments. Soldiers carry a very specific kind of silence. We carry memories that weigh a ton. We carry scars that civilians will absolutely never understand. We spend our lives bleeding in the dirt to protect a society that complains about cold coffee and bad traffic. And sometimes the hardest reality to swallow is that the people waiting for us back home are the ones who appreciate that sacrifice the least. Age does not make people better. It does not bring maturity or wisdom. It just slowly burns away the polite filters, exposing the ugly, selfish things people try to hide when they are young. For 31 years, I craved the basic fundamental understanding of my own family. I wanted them to understand the sleepless nights, the bone-crushing weight of command, the split-second bloody decisions I had to make so other people could go home to their families. But the cold, hard truth was staring me right in the face. They did not want to understand. Understanding my sacrifice meant they would have to acknowledge their own profound cowardice. I finally realized something as the plane banked hard to the north. I did not need them to understand anymore. I did not need their permission to be proud of who I am. I only demanded the absolute baseline of human respect. When they refused to hand it over, I simply reached out and took it back by force. Last night was not a tragedy. It was a surgical extraction. I had spent years dragging around the toxic weight of my parents' indifference, Julian's pathetic insecurities, and Arabella's empty, venomous vanity. I let them use my guilt as a weapon. I let them drain my bank account to buy their own comfort. £32,000. That was the ransom I paid to realize my family was entirely bankrupt in every single way that actually mattered. I reached up. My index finger brushed against the thick raised scar tissue running across my collarbone. Arabella saw a flaw to mock. Julian saw something to ignore. My mother saw an inconvenience. But they were dead wrong. These scars are not signs of a broken, lonely woman. They are not marks of weakness or a lack of emotional warmth. They are the heavy, permanent medals of a survivor. They are absolute proof that when the world caught fire, I did not run away. I walked right into the flames. From this moment forward, Commander Cassandra Watts does not shrink herself to fit into anyone else's narrow, fragile comfort zone. The plane hit a rough patch of turbulence, shaking the cabin violently for a few seconds. Then the nose pitched up, and we broke completely through the dense grey cloud cover. Blinding absolute white sunlight flooded through the small plexiglass window. It washed over my face, carrying a sudden sharp heat. The storm was entirely beneath us now. There was nothing but clear, endless blue sky ahead. Sometimes the absolute greatest victory you will ever achieve in this life is not destroying your enemies. It is simply walking away. It is looking at the people who use you, the people who disrespect you, the people who try to make you feel small, and permanently locking the door behind them. If you have stayed with me until the very end of this flight, I know exactly why you are here. You carry your own scars. You have a Julian or an Arabella in your life. You have given your blood, your money, and your sanity to people who share your last name only to have them spit in your face when you ask for basic decency. You are not crazy. You are not the villain, and you are absolutely not alone. Do not ever let a coward convince you that your strength is a character flaw. Do not let people who have never built a single thing in their lives tear down the fortress you constructed with your own bare hands. Stop setting yourself on fire just to keep toxic people warm. Stand up, square your shoulders, walk out of their tent, and never look back. Thank you for listening to my story. Please leave a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe to Hidden Family Infidelity and Revenge for more content.